Here's the problem with space. It's all the space. Really gets in the way. You see, there's so much space that there ended up being a lifetime of nothing in between all the interesting parts. As it happens, there just isn't a way to get around this. That explains why in the quiet glow of the 6th millennium, half of humanity has drifted over the horizon of civilization. They're out there, rutting and rotting, leaving their mark and cleaning up the marks left before them. Rimworlds, they call those places. Places far beyond a signal, off the beaten track, or on tracks that just couldn't be beat. Places where you're truly free to do anything. Sounds exciting, but the thing is, anything can be done to you in return. And when you crunch the numbers, most of the things that can theoretically happen to you in life are quite nasty. I suppose that's why on the core worlds they don't really let anything happen. But people get the bug now and again, or the shove, and head off into the unknown. They travel to these Rimworlds to begin a new life on the planets our forebears painstakingly terraformed for a bit, then gave up on. You have to go into a sort of coma to travel to these places, since it takes hundreds of years. You can wake up roughly as old as you were before, now facing the future in an unknown land. A lot of those lands are real dives, since it's so hard to keep them clued in on the ways of civilization that they often get forgotten. Or they straight up forget how to forge plaster steel and then kill each other trying to hoard the last scraps. You know how it is with people sometimes. Means these worlds are often just a slow disaster, boosted up now and again when a colony ship arrives with fresh supplies and fresh meat. Such a colony ship once arrived on a planet called Pieces, but were received quite rudely. So rudely that the ship was quickly stolen by some wild, fervorous locals and perhaps accidentally launched off on a new course. The insurance companies had rigged the whole thing to blow just in case this happened, but again pesky space got in the way of a quick termination. Took so long for the detonation signal to travel from HQ that it was some 30 years before the joyriding ship finally got snapped in two by fiery blasts. But it was not entirely inhumane. Those aboard were invited to wake from stasis and stumble into escape capsules shortly before. Crew and cargo were jettisoned on a collision course with the nearest inhabited planet. By the grace of a cosmic alignment, they had been passing through a system with such a planet in orbit. But such good luck rarely lasts. It was a Rimworld. This renegade crew were tumbling into a whole world of trouble. These escape capsules weren't all on the same trajectory, so we'll concern ourselves with a particularly remarkable one and see how it does. The capsule itself was torched by the atmosphere, but that was all accounted for in its design. It was burned to smithereens, but inside its 3 occupants remained safe in so-called drop pods. You can guess how these worked. Handily they came with a flimsy, glittering parachute of sorts, so they touched down at the drop site without immense injury to those inside. The poor cargo hadn't been given the same treatment. It was sticking out of the mud on the warm mountainside those pods had chanced upon. After a few minutes of steaming quiet, the drop pod doors were rocketed off, and the escape sequence was complete. Now for a new kind of escape. "Lady!" a voice shouted as a burly fellow with a bowl cut swiped at the smoke blocking his exit. Outside his pod, a young woman was standing amid the mess, pointing at the sky. She was half his height, and from behind was partially hidden by her long sheets of mud-encrusted black hair. "This ain't Pieces," she said, holding back any tone. Wrong sun in the sky had given the game away. I should explain that these travellers had no memory of their journey in stasis, so it wasn't so naive to wonder if they were still on the right planet. "Holy gags, that was quick. Is this the Hillocat? Where's Griffin?" the man asked, looking around. It was a pleasant view, warm and verdant like the lands south of his old home village. It was hard to believe they weren't on Pieces, but the little stargazer was never wrong. "Why would this be a Hillocat?" she asked, finally looking down from the sky. Didn't you hear Griffin? That's what's out here. Out somewhere. This place feel holy to you? You think finding a hill of cats as easy as feeling it? You ain't no witch, are you? Then why are you here? What? It's just us. Everyone's gone. How'd I end up still with you, bless 'em all? We got in the same carriage, didn't we? When all the bleating was going off, I had your hand and we went after those lights. Thought the others were coming too, heard 'em behind me. The other carriages? You what? 3 yams down the right side, there was a marking identical to the one above the doors we went in. Another carriage. Thought even you wouldn't remember that mad dash. And I thought even you wouldn't forget that someone else got in with us. The woman gestured to the 3rd drop pod remnants lying on their side behind the man. By the bits, hope it's Griffin, he said, turning to investigate. Hope it ain't, the woman muttered, staying still. Oi! Anyone in there? The man called. He moved closer and fanned the smoke away. Hello? You alive in there? A cough came from inside the pod, then a dog's bark. The man bent over to take a look. A pudgy fellow with comical spines of black hair was lying on his side, still hanging on to the overhead grips. Sitting beside him with a dour expression was a husky, which wagged its tail and started panting at the man outside as he leant in. Oh, you, coming out, lad? The man asked. The man in the pod shook his head. It's not him, the older man called to the woman. At this she came over and peered in too. Hey idiot, get out of there, she said with a scowl. The man inside immediately complied, saying nothing. The dog raced out and ran around him a few times, then disappeared off into the nearby long grass. The pudgy man looked at the sky and pointed at the sun. Wrong bit, he whispered. Yeah, we know. Who are you? There was no hound in the carriage, was there? The woman asked. The man dropped his arm, then sat on the ground without responding. Hey, mate, come on, the older man said, crouching beside him. We're in trouble here, alright? But we'll be fine. I'm Boy, this is Lady. What's your call? The young man started patting his legs as if looking for a pocket. However, all 3 of them had lost their possessions up on the colony ship after some pushy mechanical arms redressed them in silky blue pajamas. Unable to find whatever it was, the man lay back in the mud with his eyes closed and whispered, Staves. You what? Boy asked. Staves! Staves almost screamed. Boy and Lady turned aside and let him lie in the mud in peace. Bloody hell, we've got some noble wonk, Boy muttered. Forget him, what about us? We need to get out of here, Lady insisted. No chance, look at all this. Boy started walking amidst the wrecked cargo. There were all manner of tools, familiar and unfamiliar, on top of sweet-smelling boxes that might just be food. We got the colony kits here. So what? We have to find the others. We have to find firewood, Lady. Smoke'll lead 'em to us if they're around here. We got the gear and they don't. We can pretend it's the village, can't we? Since we'd have to start over there anyway. Don't. Sorry, won't mention it. We just gotta get a roof over our heads. This was what Griffin was saying all this does, wasn't it? He had the man from the cosmos who was talking his whatever talk, and the bishop was saying it's all for making houses and the like. How does it work? You tell me, clever bits. I've never seen this stuff before. You recognise a shovel, don't you? Boy, just... And what about him? Lady asked, pointing back at Staves. He still hadn't moved. We can make use of him. Let's see how we feel come dinner time, huh? Boy grinned. Lady pouted, stifling a laugh, and got to work dragging gear from the wreckage. It was colonizing gear, as mentioned, intended for use on pieces, one imagines. Piles of nicely polished stretches of wood, rough, wrinkly sheets of metal, and tools ranging from easy-peasy spades and hammers to weird headless brooms and burning hot quills. But you didn't necessarily need to know how that technology from the far cosmos worked to get some use out of it. The quills could cut the wood and metal into shapes in an instant, and the headless broom made a loud banging noise when you pulled a lever on its underside, which also seemed to launch a tiny arrow so fast your eyes couldn't keep up with it. A crossless crossbow, the pair concluded. While it took some effort to dig all the fallen crates up and fizzle away at the metal clasps holding them shut, the reward was worth it. The colony kit featured bedding, cooking equipment, and lots of gizmos of unknown design. Each item came with a pictorial guide that seems to indicate how to assemble and use it. One gizmo appeared to make fire inside a little glass ball. Handy, but baser needs had to be seen to first. The pair caught sight of the husky dog now and again as it dashed about, and decided to catch up to it. It saw them chasing and jogged on just ahead, taking them about 10 minutes from the crash site to a river running from a cave in the side of a small mountain. You are probably imagining this quite differently to how it was, since this was a terraformed mountain, a cheaply terraformed one at that. These imitations of geological marvels tended to lack foothills and were more like walls of rock that shot up suddenly, creating unweathered mesas with unnatural shapes. The dog stopped to drink from the river. Boy and lady soon followed suit. "Says cannibal," Boy said after glancing the dog's collar. "Gotta be griffins, right?" "Might be a cosmic people dog," lady said. "Not written like that it ain't. Castle mutt for sure, or a hunting dog. Might be able to find us some help, mightn't it? And what's it found us here then?" "Well..." Boy looked up at the banks and cliffs around the cave. The rock was bluish and clean, lacking moss or the wrinkles of a geological past. "It's like a castle," he commented. Very square and about the right height, his assessment was on the mark. "Don't need a castle," lady said. She was looking into the river cave, seeing light at the other end. "Hello?" she called into it. Only echoes. "I'd agree, but no one thinks a castle's any good until it all goes down the pit. You saw them clamouring in the town. Invaders must have been at all the villages." "Boy, no," lady croaked, shaking her head. Sorry. Well, don't matter. Hunk of rocks are used to us right now, innit? That's one wall done already," Boy said, clapping a hand on the grainy rock. It was cool to the touch. The mesa cast a shadow over the pile of materials that Lady and Boy started hauling up to the rock and river's edge. Didn't take much sun tracking to work out they were in the southern hemisphere, although Boy didn't really understand the meaning of Lady's rote explanation of such. The dog, Cannibal, followed them backwards and forwards, and barked with obvious hesitation at the odd small mammal in the grass. Lots of new planet smell to process, no doubt. After a few hours of dragging, Boy and Lady had a decent pile of wooden boards with little teeth around the edge. These teeth let them be slotted together pretty fast. After a couple hours more, the pair had hammered together 3 huts against the rock face. A bedding box provided for 2, while the kitchen gear was hauled into the 3rd, stacked unhygienically in the dusty dirt. You might be wondering what happened to that Staves fellow. Lady and Boy were too, having not seen him even around the crash site all day. They speculated that he had gone his own way, but in truth he was there, just hard to spot. He had been lying in the long grass of the lush hillside, looking at the new sky. It was a shock when he plodded up to the huts at dusk like some well-groomed yeti. "Oi, you feeling alright, fella?" Boy said, putting down the crowbar he was heaving against a stubborn supply box. Staves nodded and stood still, staring at the box. "We reckon there's another load of the cosmic bed stuff in here. We found a set earlier, you wouldn't believe it. Gets dirty quicker than nothing else though." Staves looked over at the huts, then to Lady over by the river, who was reading through those pictograph guides several at a time on the ground around her. After he said nothing for a while, Boy held out the crowbar. "You want to help?" he asked, the friendly veneer fading. Staves shook his head. "Let me put it another way. You want to eat?" Boy stressed. Staves raised a hand, revealing an empty paper container. It was one of those sweet-smelling packages from the crash, theorized to be food. Staves skillfully ripped it along its seams, then folded it away into his pocket. Without a word, he slipped into one of the huts. "By the bits! Even a bloody hillocat won't save you, Wonky!" Boy shouted. He listened for a response, but heard only Lady's muttering mixed with the hiss of water in the cave. He thought about storming into the hut, but turned instead to look at Lady. She had been pulling the pictograms closer and closer as the light faded, and showed no signs of stopping yet. Boy sighed aloud. "Shut up," Lady immediately said. "Ain't you even a bit worried?" Boy asked her, trudging over with sinking steps. "Been worse. What about Auntie? Oh, you remember her now. What? Thought you only cared about Griffin. I don't care. I just want to know what's going on." Lady waved an arm around her. "This is going on. This could be it." "It ain't it." "Why not?" "'Cause, well, it ain't the Hillocat, and why'd we end up wherever we are if there weren't one somewhere?" "Disaster?" "Ain't no disaster." "What about the wonk?" "He's wonking out in there. Let's have him cool down for now." "You're the one who's itching for it, bro." "It's dangerous, you know, gotta be ready for anything." "But not a disaster, right?" "No, it's not." "Just keep an eye open." "Might do." With this, Lady started slapping closed her books and piling them up. "Anything good?" Boy asked. "Reckon so." "Wanted your own farm, didn't you?" "Wanted Dad's farm." "Then why wouldn't you kill him?" Lady asked with rehearsed pointedness. "Didn't come to that in the end, did it?" "Yeah, it was worse." "Thought we weren't going to talk about it?" "Alright, night." "Night? Night. As you say then." Boy left Lady by the river and went into the other bed hut to sample the colony kit's fine threads. Cannibal came over and sat next to Lady, looking expectantly at the food boxes piled on a pallet nearby. "Might not be enough," Lady commented to the dog. Cannibal didn't have such a nuanced view. Lady ended up sitting with the husky all night, sharing a spot of sleep here and there. It was hard to drift away from that fresh spring air, marketed as the embodiment of freedom in places light decades distant. For Lady, it was very familiar. Sleeping out with the animals was how her whole ordeal with Boy and family had started. 2 days ago, she had thought it over as she witnessed the underwhelming death of their cruel father. If it weren't for Boy's hand in hers, she might have stayed there amid the mania of the invasion, come what may. Instead, she was slave, pirate, captive, and colonist all in one day, and had gotten lost like a character stepping from the pages of a book into another. But here or there, the paths forward were identical: die or live again. The alien stars gave no directions. She could pray if this world truly had a Hillocat, a node of the Almighty God. She could also pray if it did not. By her will or against it, the sun emerged, its light too soft, its disk too small, and gave her another day. Cannibal was stirred by the light, and returned to anxiously staring at the food pallet. Birds and forest creatures were making a racket all across the mountainside, and in the distance, trails of smoke were mixing into the lowland mists of a great plain to the east. "Fine then," Lady muttered, dusting herself off. For all that had ended far away, that which began then on that mountainside would surpass it. Hence we encounter the story of the 3 survivors from a lost planet, facing down the hand they were dealt, marvelous and strange, fearful and fresh, conclusive yet rejuvenating. They would make their mark on that forgotten world, as the world in turn marked them. Intrigued? I'd best get into the filthy details then, eh? I assure you, it's going to be quite the tale.